The new immigration law is being closely watched in neighboring California, and candidates there are lining up both for and against it. I talked about that and a whole lot more with Republican Senate candidate Carly Fiorina. She's the former chairman of Hewlett-Packard and a former economic advisor to John McCain. Did the folks in Arizona do the right thing or the wrong thing in passing that new immigration law?
Well, you know, the folks in Arizona are responding to their frustration and their fear. What I think is terrible is that they are being vilified when what we ought to be talking about is the federal government's failure to do its job. The reality is the federal government needs not one new piece of legislation to secure the border. President Obama ought to do his job, use his presidential powers, and secure the border. And Barbara Boxer ought to do her job and demand that the federal government do its job.
So did the people in Arizona do the right thing or the wrong thing?
The people of Arizona did what they felt they had to do.
Do you support it? Do you support that?
I support their need to protect their citizens. But what we ought to be talking about is the federal government needs to secure the border. This is an administration that has cut funding to secure the border.
Do you support comprehensive immigration reform on a federal level?
I support the federal government doing its job.
Do you support comprehensive immigration reform?
I'm going to get to your question. Without one new piece of legislation, the federal government has the power and the responsibility to secure the border and to come up with a temporary worker program that works. That's what the federal government needs to do. Forget trying to change the subject and talk about comprehensive immigration reform. Let's do what the federal government is required to do.
Do you support a pathway to citizenship for 12 million, 14 million, whatever number of illegal immigrants are in the United States?
I do not support amnesty. I support the federal government doing its job. Secure the border, have a temporary worker program that works, because in California there are industries that depend upon truly temporary worker, and that program doesn't work.
On this issue of a pathway to citizenship as part of comprehensive immigration reform, you disagree with the positions that Lindsey Graham and John McCain took, because they were leaders in the failed effort back in 2007 when President Bush was president to get this kind of legislation through. On this issue, you disagree with them.
I do, and I believe what we need to be doing is demanding that the federal government do its job instead of changing the subject, trying to talk about legislation. We need to demand hold the government accountable for doing its job. Right. Secure the border. Get a temporary worker program that works.
Let's talk about drilling, offshore oil drilling. A lot of people are shaken by what has happened in the Gulf of Mexico. How worried are you that that could happen off the coast of California, where there's plenty of offshore oil drilling right now?
Well, first, it is obviously a very troublesome situation. And while I support offshore drilling, if it can be done in an environmentally safe way, and most of the time it is, certainly technology has come a long way. An accident like this shakes people to the core, no question. I believe it should be up to the voters of each state. Interestingly, in the last 5 years, the voters of California have come to favor by a majority offshore drilling.
That was before this incident.
That's right. And I think people will take a very hard look at what happened here and how this kind of accident should be
prevented. Should there be a moratorium on new offshore oil drilling off the coast of California pending this investigation?
I don't think so, but I do think that we ought to use the power of all the available science and industry knowledge to say what went wrong here and how can we make sure it never happens again. But
the drilling that's taking place right now should continue. It should not be frozen or suspended pending this investigation.
No, I do not believe so.
You have confidence. So you're one of those like Sarah Palin, drill, baby, drill.
No, I wouldn't say drill, baby, drill, but what I would say is I believe that the United States of America needs to take advantage of every source of domestic energy we have. We ought to take advantage of oil, coal, natural gas, nuclear, and yes, sun and wind and all the rest of it. But if we are serious about growing our economy and lessening our dependence on foreign oil, then offshore drilling has to be part of that equation. And I would hope that people wouldn't use this tragedy, it's both an economic tragedy and an environmental tragedy, to politicize the notion and say, see, it can't be done safely. The truth is, it is being done safely in many places.
As we speak today, the numbers, the first quarter of this year, positive economic growth, more than 3%. This is the third consecutive quarter of economic growth. As you know, the economists always say 2 consecutive quarters of economic growth. The recession is over. Does President Obama deserve credit for turning the economy around?
Well, you see, I don't think this is an economy that is uniformly robust. I think what you're seeing is recovery with big businesses in particular, but what you're not seeing is a recovery with small businesses. And that's extremely concerning because it is small businesses that create most of the new jobs.
Better though now than a year ago.
Oh, there's no question it's better than a year ago.
So does President Obama deserve some credit for that?
I don't think the stimulus package had one thing to do with the economic recovery. I think what we're seeing is a typical cyclical return to growth as big companies restock their inventories. But when I look at California, where we have destroyed jobs, where we have 8 counties with unemployment above 20%, 25 counties with unemployment above 15%, unemployment rates that are increasing, not decreasing, since President Obama took office. What I see is the test case of what happens when you have bigger government, higher taxes, and thicker regulations. You destroy jobs, and we're destroying small businesses.
All those people that were unemployed, the recession obviously continues, no matter what the economists are saying about economic growth. We know you've been suffering from breast cancer. You look great. How do you feel?
Well, I feel great because I have beaten breast cancer like so many other survivors. I'm one of the lucky ones. I'm very grateful. You know, there are blessings in all tough passages, and there have been blessings in this passage. I've met many, many inspiring people. My faith is stronger. My family is stronger. And honestly, after chemotherapy, a political race doesn't seem that scary.
Good for you. And we wish you only the best. Thanks very much for coming in.
Thanks.